various people who have presented and today. So for that will be moderated by my colleague Stefan Kramer. I pass the floor to you, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you very much, dear presenters. What I will try to do is focus perhaps in the remaining 10-15 minutes on the cooperation aspect of today's workshop, which in my mind raises two questions. One is what kind of sectors or application should cooperation between the EU and Korea and the other Indico partners in the future focus on, and what form can that cooperation take? I think we have heard from speakers that there is a research and development cooperation. There is, of course, the ongoing cooperation in the standardization bodies, but there may be other forms, such as sharing of best practices, etc. Maybe just a very brief, before I address the individual speakers, one brief housekeeping remark. If you wish to contribute, please raise your hand, or you may also want to, in fact, put a question in the chat. So talking of sectors, we heard of many use cases, and we have heard of those use cases in the context, of course, of Korea, but also specific parts of the EU. What, in your view, could be the use cases that would benefit most from data interoperability between smart cities? So are we talking energy? Are we talking water management? Are we talking transportation? And there are two colleagues who I think have touched upon that in their use case presentations. And first I would like to ask Christophe to come in on this, if I may. What are the use cases that would benefit most from data interoperability between different cities in a country, or perhaps even the world? Thank you, Christophe.
Welcome. Yes, of course, energy would be a very important topic. We can see how the demand on electricity is increasing due to the more and more electrical vehicles, bikes, and other things which have to circulate inside our cities. So, of course, energy is a very, very, very important topic, and we have many different stakeholders acting on producing electricity at the level of a city, and we already had discussions with building makers and utilities, and even with the citizen who would appreciate to contribute to the electricity production through solar panels and other different way of producing. And yes, I think that would be very, very interesting to be able to get this interoperability. That's what we lack just now, to bring this aggregation of data about electricity production at the level of a community. So that would be really a great and a good progress for us to be able to have this aggregation. I don't know if that answers to your question, but
yes, indeed, it does. Maybe just one follow-up question: and how would you facilitate that interoperability, or that exchange of information between smart cities? I mean, what would be the form of cooperation you would propose in that regard?
That's a good question. We had already different contributions with my colleagues from Korea, with Sung-Young Mong, for example, about U-band platforms. So we already participated in European programs. We talked about synchronicity, for example, which was a good example of what we could do together. And well, maybe European projects should be also another good way to work together again.
Thank you. I would also like to hear from Professor Andrew Han on the same question, if I may.
Okay, so actually there is many cases, I think, for the transport system between smart cities. But the point is that is interface between cities using data. So I think they are very, very useful, but already it is a popular use cases. That is the transportation information is changing. So that provides two kind of services to passengers and operators. So like the passenger, they can find some transportation timetable across the smart cities, and they also providing the public transportation services crossing smart cities as well. So this kind of use case is very useful to passengers, and also that is very, I mean, the popular as well. And the second one is for the operators. This kind of interchanging data that provide the controlling traffic information. So there are many roads and the railways and the mobilities as well. So this kind of thing is they need the information from the smart cities, like the road traffic information or the any pass information as well. So the operators, they gathering this kind of information together, and they organizing the traffic control, like for the railway system. As I mentioned, the railway, they have the signaling system. So if we gathering this kind of information from each smart cities, then we can adjusting the signaling to control the traffics like that. So even in this case, even though I make an example about transport information, but I think other use cases are existed. Yeah, that's just the example. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Maybe if I just put Emilio on the spot for a moment. I mean, is there a case for EU, Korean CSA cooperation support actions when it comes to questions of data interoperability, you know, broadening that concept beyond the EU? Is that something that would be feasible under Horizon Europe, especially with a possible association of Korea to Horizon Europe in mind?
Actually, there are some example. As I mentioned, the signaling system for the railway. The point is the European signaling system for railway and the Korean system for the railway, I mean, Korean signaling system for railway, that is different, you know? So, but the point is the railway in the future, not now, the European railway and the Korean railway will be connected in the future. So in that case, maybe the controlling the signal system will be the same. That means we can running the automatic control railway from Seoul to the Europe somewhere. So that is not applied to the country to country. That is also applied to the city to city. So I think in the future there are many railway services will be will be developed, that means our interfaces will be developed together. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Emilio, maybe a few words to add?
Yeah, thank you. No, you have a good point there, and this is, I think, a good question to pose as how we can continue this cooperation, and in particular, and there are some avenues that could be done. So one thing is, for instance, cooperating through Horizon, and in particular, if Korea joins the scheme. Of course, there is already, if I remember well, there is a support actions to support data standards that if I remember well, because I don't have it at all my head, that is under evaluation now, and this could be a good opportunity when it's live and running to approach this support action and see how we can promote common standards altogether. Because this is the idea, is not only to promote a European standard, but is to promote common standards at global level. And their cooperation with Koreans could be very helpful. Another way is not only through Horizon, of course, but also in the different standardization organizations. So we have seen the presentation about the idea of local digital twins and bringing some standardization opportunities into ITUT from the part of living in EU together with Open and Agile Smart Cities, but they are working to bring some standardization activities there. And there we know that Korea is very active, being the chair of the study group, a Korean person. So this is an opportunity to identify common use cases to start working on common standards through local digital twins, for instance.
Thank you, Emilio. I was looking for any raised hands. I understand that Xavier has a few thoughts on how to improve data interoperability between different cities in the world. But then I would also like to, at the very end of the session, because I see now Massimo has raised a hand, and so has Olavi. But perhaps very quickly Xavier, and then Massimo, and then Olavi, and then I think we need to conclude this session because we are running out of time. Thank you very much. Over to you, Xavier.
Stefan, I can keep that for my concluding remark, but I want to highlight also there is a question in the Q&A part on potential gaps between the GDPR in Europe and Korean data privacy rule regarding data treatment. And I think it's probably a good time for us to remind people that we've had a data adequacy agreement that was signed end of mid-December, I think, 2021, that basically recognizes that similar principles are used in both countries for the handling of personal data, right?
Indeed, this is a question which you rightly have identified in the Q&A, and I read it out very briefly. Hi, don't you think there are some gaps between GDPR Europe and Korean data privacy rules regarding data treatments, how each EU citizen reacts if we're asking to provide and to agree, like South Korea's application? This is a question I would perhaps put to the panelists, but you're right, Xavier. I think any possible data adequacy decision also would help to address any such gaps. I can see that Tony wants to perhaps come in on this special point. So before I get back to Massimo and Olavi, Tony, please come in on this question from the Q&A.
Yeah, just to confirm what Xavier said. So, I mean, on the 17th of December, to be precise, of last year, the European Commission and the Korean authorities have signed so-called adequacy decision, which means that personal data can travel freely between the EU and Korea and vice versa, because there is a recognition that the level of protection of personal data in Korea is, from the EU perspective, is equivalent or adequate with regard to the protection which we give to personal data in the European Union under our so-called General Data Protection Regulation. So that, just to clarify that point, which is in the Q&A, that this is a very important step, and which is, I think, very important in underpinning all of this and the cooperation between EU and Korea in the digital sphere, and in particular around IoT and smart cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for this critical information. Massimo, I understand you wanted to come in on the interoperability. Over to you.
Yes, interoperability, but seen from a practical point of view. I want just a very short idea. We see often, and this today has been the case as well, many wonderful projects that are being developed here and there, and in other parts of the world, by the way, and they share similar objectives, contexts, needs, and so on. Of course, the practical details of each project is tailored to the situation at hand. But I am sure that a lot of the underlying machinery, not all, but a lot, is and performs things that are very, very similar to each other. Not all, but given two projects that solve the same need, it is very likely that at least some part could be shared. And it is not. And it is a shame and a waste of resources, varied human resources. This is sometimes mitigated by goodwill of the parties, because if I know a friend in Korea, and I do, I sometimes can ask him for sharing at least knowledge, but also perhaps some, let's say, piece of code or whatever. There is no, at least to my knowledge, which is very limited, no clear way to focus on these, factorize out the parts that could be shared and actually shared them. First of all, those parts are not known to outside each project, for instance. And I doubt that there is, at least in the projects I have seen working, an explicit effort in dividing what has been done for a given project and what could be reusable, and an attempt to actually reuse that. So just the idea. I think it could work well between Europe and Korea, because there are very close similarities for the two kinds of societies. There are differences as well, but I found a good relationship with the people there. So I think it would work, but it should be designed and put to work willingly and jointly. That's it.
Thank you, Massimo, for this response. Very much appreciated. Olavi, you will have the last word of this session, as you're also the last one to raise his hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Well, I would like to especially second Emilio's point on the local digital twins cooperation, especially in the ITUT study group 20, which is indeed led by Dr. Hyung-Yoon Kim. And so I think also from the wider Korean perspective, this would be a very natural way forward. And this would be building on previous collaboration already in the Synchronicity project, and which then has led to U4SSC, the United for Smart and Sustainable Cities, work on the UN, across the UN organizations. Now that deliverable is about to come out, and based on that, and based on the new chairmanship of the study group 20, and really ongoing discussions on how the Living in EU technical work is ongoing, and the new versions coming from there, I would very much support also on the Korean national level if we could look into local digital twins work item in the study group 20. That would be a very concrete way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Olavi, for that. That leaves me to simply point out a brief reference to a data standards project which Emilio put in the chat. Please take good note of that. And I hand over back to you, Tony. Thank you, colleagues, for your contributions.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I think it was really good to conclude with this interactive session, and thank you to those who put questions. I mean, without further ado, we're running a little bit over time. Thanks also to Stefan's efforts to recuperate a bit of the overrun.